Brilliance Audio presents A Merciful Promise by Kendra Elliot, performed by Terry Schnaubelt. Mercy held her breath and stepped back as they dragged the bleeding man past her. The other observers cleared a path, their faces solemn, their gazes locked on the moaning man. Two of the members, rifles slung over their shoulders, gripped the man's upper arms and pulled him toward their commander, Pete, at the front of the group. They threw him to the ground at Pete's feet, and he stayed down, curling into a tight ball, his gasps echoing in the forest clearing. What will Pete do? Pete's stance was wide, his hands clasped behind his back, his spine perfectly straight. His chin jutted forward, and he stood immobile. Without moving his head, he lowered his gaze to the beaten man, and his mouth pressed into a thin, white line. Disdain and disappointment flowed from him, and mutters sounded through the group, its own anger growing. The mob's ire was palpable, slamming through Mercy's skin and skidding up the back of her neck. Goosebumps lifted the hair on her arms as she stared at the man who stood in front of the group. Pete wore his usual dark olive pants and shirt, and a Glock on his hip. The weapon seemed to grow larger, almost pulsate with power, even though he didn't move his hand in its direction. He didn't need to demonstrate his authority. His people fell into line. They hung on his every word, and right now the group leaned forward, greedy for his decision. Ed Merrick had broken a rule. Mercy knew the rules. Everybody knew the rules. What everyone didn't know was the penalty for breaking a rule. Pete was judge and jury, and the punishments were his decisions. The muttering faded away, and absolute silence filled the clearing. Approximately 40 people waited for Pete's declaration. Most were men. A few dressed similarly to Pete, in olive from head to toe. They also carried weapons, either a handgun or a rifle on the shoulder. But most of the men wore jeans or rugged work pants. The weather was cool for late September, and everyone wore durable jackets, many stained with sweat and hard work. Mercy tried to make eye contact with a woman to her left, but the woman stared straight ahead, her brows raised, impatiently awaiting Pete's declaration with the rest of the group. The few women in the camp had already shown Mercy that they did not speak out against injustice. This won't end well. Foreboding filled the air, and Mercy shifted her balance to her toes. Her partner, Chad Finn, felt her move and tightened his arm around her, giving her upper arm a reassuring squeeze. She leaned into him, grateful for his touch, and rested her cheek against his shoulder. He smelled of sweat. Everybody smelled of sweat. Showers were scarce, and the laundry system was primitive. Pete raised his gaze to take in the crowd. He scanned the group, and even Mercy felt anticipation of his words. He made eye contact with her and moved on, leaving her feeling acknowledged and included. It was one of Pete's gifts. He looked at you as if you had a fascinating story to tell, as if you were relevant, as if you mattered. Everyone felt accepted. Ed had a cell phone. Pete's calm voice reached every set of ears. You know, cell phones aren't allowed. His gaze scanned the group again, and heads nodded. If you need to make a call, you come to me. I will help you. More nods. They believe he is generous, but he outlawed cell phones. We all know what the phones can lead to. We can't have that. We won't be divided. One of the men who dragged Ed to the front handed Pete an old flip phone. Pete tossed it in his hands a few times, a crisp, slapping sound against his palm. Why did you break the rule, Ed? Pete asked, keeping his gaze on the group. A collective intake of breath came from the crowd. Still in a ball on the ground, Ed shook his head, his eyes squeezed shut. Fresh abrasions covered one side of his face. The men who dragged him to Pete stared down at the victim, their expressions impassive.